migrants in Bogota, but I also
Bogota.
wanted to ask about. Yes.
Excellent question, because that is on it. So what I noticed about this quiz or final exam is that there's a lot on positivism versus more natural rights, humanitarian law. What does that mean? Well, essentially, it's basically going to be asking, um, are we going to, support humanitarian rights, natural law, that is the human rights of human beings, or state law, positivist stress state laws that state have a right. So in the idea of Bogota, that was just the in Colombia, those Venezuelans were, in the street, and I taped them, and under humanitarian law, it would, basically say they have rights. But under positivist kind of state rights, it would say, well, only to the extent to which the state will recognize their rights. So that's where that question is. Excellent question to begin with. But if you remember, that's one of the just little short videos from Bogota, Colombia. Anything else?
Yes, I actually do have a question.
Awesome.
Could you talk about the difference between natural law and humanitarian law and positivism? I saw those three together and I kind of just get them a little bit mixed up. So if you can kind of just highlight what each one.
Humanitarian law and natural law are basically saying people have natural rights, humanitarian rights, right? That people, even a state, cannot take away. The thing about positivism is it sees itself as more realistic, because it's essentially saying, hey, look, we live in a more state-centric world. The states rule. It's going to be basically up to the states, right? So when I'm asking questions about, say, the states' rights, this is about, in the international system, that states have certain rights they shouldn't surrender their sovereignty to, as one of the debates were, to, say, the United Nations, International Court of Justice, and others, that the state takes precedent. And it's an interesting concept, because then there's real policy initiatives for international law, meaning the state has the final say. So even in the case, as Tyler mentioned, with Bogota, even if, right, think about it, even if you draw upon natural law, the positivists will say, well, it'll be the state who has the final say. So whether those people have rights or not will depend on the state. And when I say the state, whatever government is in power. So, if the state wants to say, well, they have limited rights, we're going to deport them, then they're going to be deported. But then people who stress humanitarian law and natural rights, those people have natural rights and the state can't do that. So it really is a debate about the extent to which the state, that is the country, has rights over human beings. And this comes up a lot in Turkey. Oh, I should ask that. They had a lot of camps, refugee camps, United Nations refugee, for like the Kurds and other groups. And Turkey kicked them out and said, but, this is our right. This is our territory. We have rights. But the United Nations would argue, well, there are humanitarian rights that supersede the rights of the Turkish state. But the Turkish state will say, no, we have the last say. So it really depends on where you sit. And that depends, that will be huge in the court case. And the other differentiation is reprisals and retortion. Reprisals are basically actions taken by the state that are illegal under international law, whereas retortion might be, like war or some kind of action where people get hurt or the state gets hurt, but it's not illegal. And that's one of the things that's important as well. And I can repeat that if you have a question on that.
Yeah, can you do that again? Or
I could do it many times. So retortion, right? If you're basically arguing a case in front of the courts, right? And you say, okay, Russia makes the argument, we are causing harm in the Ukraine, but it's legal because we're protecting the rights of Russian people in the Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, say, right? Another state will say, no, this is reprisal. It's an attack on a state, and it's not based on legality. It's an illegal attack. That would be reprisal. But retortion is that, and the same would go for Israel and the Palestinian crisis. Is it, legal or illegal what they're doing? And that's one of the things the cases are argued, that what we're doing is within the legality of international law, whereas others would say it's outside of the legality. So you just remember that. There's only one question on that. Reprisals, you would argue, is illegal, and retortion is basically legal action within international law. So reprisals, I think, is easy to remember because it's like reprisal is kind of like, there's a negative connotation to a reprisal. It's like an attack on someone that might be unsolicited. So that's international law. Is, the attack on the Ukraine solicited or unsolicited? Is it based on reprisal or retortion? Is it illegal or legal? That's very important to see. Thanks for waiting, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
What else? What else do we have?
I have an additional question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay, awesome. I saw China and the Malvinas in the keywords list, and I don't remember talking about that at all in the lectures or the readings. So if you could just...
I didn't want to take it off in case I thought I did. If other people say I didn't, I'll talk about it now, because if I take off the point, then you just lose the opportunity for the point. That's about nautical mileage. China, as we talked about earlier with territory and international law, is building these kinds of islands in the middle of the South Chinese Sea. The question becomes, right? Is China doing this? Why is it legal? That's a different question that I posit on the exam, is that it becomes a big question of nautical mileage, because if China builds islands in the middle of the South Chinese Sea, it'll push out its nautical mileage in law of the sea, meaning it gets more of whatever it's surrounding, fishing, rights to the sea, basically. And it's not just fishing. There could be oil there. It could be, trying to get through some straits. There's a broad spectrum of issues when you build an island, right? Nautical mileage. And the Malvinas, Falkland, depending on where you sit, if you're from Argentina, you say Malvinas. If you're from the United Kingdom, you say the Falkland Islands. It's an interesting phenomena because the Falkland Islands were, they say, part of Argentina. So Argentina invaded, and the UK fought back in the 1980s. And a lot of people say, why would the UK want this, kind of piece of island right near Argentina and go to war for it? Well, look at how far the Falkland Islands are from the UK. And it extends its nautical mileage significantly. So it will have all the fishing rights. It'll have all the oil rights, et cetera, that surround that island. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon in international law, because people like these little islands. People always say, oh, why do people fight for these little islands? Well, they fight for them because then they get all of the nautical mileage and all the goodies that are surrounding those 200 nautical mileage. So you get like all the fishing rights, shipping rights, oil rights, et cetera, that are in that area of the sea. Good question. What else do we have here? I got a new computer. It's too wide, though.
How does China justify this?
But following that logic, the whole sea, everything can be occupied, right?
Only from your territory. It's supposed to be open seas. So that's why people like islands, because then you get more nautical mileage and more rights. And also islands, you can expand your power. So if you have an island in the middle of the sea, you can land, refuel, etc. So it's very advantageous to these islands. I mean, I think what China's doing is in its self-interest, but then you just, sorry for my language, but piss off other countries like the Philippines. And then next thing you know, the Philippines is saying, okay, United States, you can build all these bases near, in our islands in order to balance China. So, it's strategic, but there's a lot of issues with it that, externalities that come with it. It's kind of like the attack on Ukraine kind of pushed Finland and Sweden into NATO. So, you know, these actions are laced with self-interest, but then sometimes they don't always go in the self-interest as we would like. So nautical mileage is very, very important for states. And the states love islands. And that was kind of one of the points I said. I did think I said in it, but if I didn't want to take off the point because, you know, it's a point to get. And now you know. So
It's in the book. It's in the reading. I think it was in Law of the Sea. And I'm getting into, so it is, I'm almost positive Law of the Sea where they talk about it. And then I was kind of getting it confused with territory, but it's not. I'm almost positive it was when we went through Law of the Sea, because then they were talking about how you can own, what can you own below and what can you own above? Like,
yeah.
you know, like outer space or whatever.
Right.
You know?
That's another thing. I got to get into that. I wish the class was a little longer to get. Outer space is going to be a huge thing. If anyone wants to study international law, it's a very ambiguous area because it's not like domestic law that's very, you know, concrete. Obviously, it's always changing, but, you know, but international law is very, very interesting. There's just so many areas. It's, you know, it's tough to be an expert in international law because you know, essentially there's so much. Like outer space is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they have no regulations on it right now, though. I mean, it's just a free-for-all almost.
Yeah, that would be a good paper. And I did want to say the thing about the Yugoslavia, that also fits the humanitarian law. The argument of bombing by NATO, the former Yugoslavia, was based on humanitarian law. I know that that's a little, you know, contradictory. How is bombing based on humanitarian law? But the argument was because the Serbs were committing genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So their argument, the United States and NATO allies, was this is based on natural humanitarian law. So the state kind of surrenders its sovereignty to the international community because it's breaking natural law, humanitarian rights.
So whenever there is genocide being committed, so you have like the Geneva Convention, and then you have the 51 in the UN Charter, and those kind of go together to basically say that yes, you can use this type of force whenever genocide is occurring.
Right.
But you have to go to the ICJ first and have them do an investigation, and then state like, oh yes, in fact, like this is justified, or it was, you know, this is justified because we see these elements, you know, or for genocide, and so, you know, absolutely,
Right.
you bomb whatever.
You get into another question on it. It depends on how you define it. So the biggest problem with genocide is this just war or is it genocide? And I do ask a question on that where I bring up discourse, where, you know, what happened in Rwanda, is this quote unquote tribal warfare or is it genocide? Is this
Right, yeah.
So that's important, where discourse, what's going on in Myanmar, matters. And that's where you get into the legalese of discourse. And it's interesting, the same thing goes with even domestic, where I think it was the Rittenhouse case, they couldn't call them victims. So discourse matters in law. And I think it's very, very interesting. So that's a question about discourse and what we call genocide. So yeah, you are
because
supposed to.
with other law, you have these elements or these requirements that can be met, but they haven't developed anything like that. I mean, they can only go by maybe like their, inferences or something like that.
Right. Yeah, genocide's difficult because the question is this just war? Because that's what Turkey argues with the Armenians. It was just war. So that's an interesting, phenomena. Is genocide? It's lamentable because a lot of states will just say, no, that was just how war is. War, a lot of people die. That's it. You like this shirt? It's very gender neutral. All right. What else?
Could you expand on Pinochet?
It's nice to see you again here. Yeah, that's the irony, like I talked about before in one of the quizzes. You know, we supported Pinochet, and it's also ironic because Henry Kissinger just died, and he was a big supporter of Pinochet. I used to call him Pinochet, but then someone just recently called him Pinochet from Chile. So you can use the pronunciation you like, but he was the brutal dictator of Chile. And what's interesting is a lot of people don't know, and I want you to know, he is the only person, and Chile is the only country that actually committed an act of terrorism. The Letelier article is in one of the modules. And, you know, he did a car bombing in the middle of our capital, but we were supporting him. So I always thought it was interesting that even the CIA itself concedes that Pinochet gave the order to kill him in Washington, D.C., which is a terrorist attack on our nation's soil, not only on our nation's soil, but also in Washington, D.C. And all these people were supporting them for security reasons, Pinochet, but yet Pinochet committed an act of terrorism on our soil. So that is, in a nutshell, what that's about. Good question.
Do you feel as if the United States should be able to implement military force with some of the domestic terrorism, like with the military being the terrorist?
Well, I don't know. This is going to get into a big thing. In Vietnam, we did end up, in that case, trying people who were in the My Lai massacre. But by and large, countries are very reluctant to prosecute their own. I mean, you know, we're very nationalistic countries, that is, not just the United States. So it'd be seen kind of as a, you know, you're a traitor. You're Benedict Arnold if you know, unless you lose a war like Germany and Japan, you're a traitor if you try to go after your own military. It's a very difficult system. That's why there's a really good documentary. This is a little bit of a deviation, but like on sexual harassment in the military, why they hadn't gone after these people for the longest time. It's tough to go after military personnel of a particular country because, you know, people start saying you're a traitor, you hate Russia if you criticize the Ukrainian war, all this stuff. So I think for any country, it's a little difficult. But we did try those people in the My Lai massacre. But they were making that argument. If you try to, that was a massacre in Vietnam, and the soldiers were held accountable in U.S. court cases. But we're not even part, which is also important to stress, of the ICC, because we don't want anyone of our country to be tried like we would try in that Yugoslavian case.
Yeah, I think that the jurisdiction needs to be established. I think maritime jurisdiction needs to be established not only for military measures, but for criminals evading justice by manipulating jurisdictions against each other.
Yeah, it's tough because, I mean, even after Nazi Germany, someone brought up the Nuremberg trials. We took in a lot of those Nazis because they had scientific knowledge and they worked with us. So it's very, very difficult beyond states. That's why the positivism, humanitarian kind of tension is on the exam a lot. Because there's a huge tension there. To what extent do states have rights, right? To say, hey, this is my soldier, we'll do what we want with him or her. Or this is my country, if I want to deport or treat immigrants like this is our right. And humanitarian, natural law, etc. And it's very, very difficult to think. And also with big powers, like they say, we're going to take Putin to the ICC. That's probably not going to happen because no one's going to be able to invade Russia to get them out. But we were able to do it in Serbia. We can do it in smaller states. But is that fair? That becomes a big question. These are good questions you're positing. Make very good papers too. So if you want to do a paper on, say, the Nuremberg trials, even though, you know, it's been done a lot, you might, you know, want to then go in that direction and say what you think the policy should be. So in your paper, you want to do some kind of case, but then, you know, talk about, you know, what other laws, like you're exactly saying, should be implemented based on, you know, the readings of this case or cases. So that's
what I was going to ask. Does it have to be a past case, or can it be a subject that we could form a case for?
Yeah, you can form a case. I'm pretty flexible as long as it's international law. What do we really care? So yeah, forming a case, like what would it look like if like Putin went to the ICC or something like that would be interesting. So yeah, forming a case is okay as well. That's a good question.
Yeah, you said outer space, and I was like, I don't think there's been any cases.
Yeah. there's got to be something. I'm obviously not an expert on outer space, but that would be an excellent. I mean, China's been. Didn't India just send people?
You know what? I think there is, because remember when
Yeah.
Musk sent the satellites over, and I think it's this. It was Russia or somebody like he sent satellites over for like Wi-Fi and stuff like that, and there was like a big huff puff about it. I don't know. I'll look at that.
Yeah, you definitely look into it. That would be a cool paper. There's so many cool papers that we could talk for hours. But I did want to stress that again, like the quiz, the Colombian peace process that I did. If you've had me before, you've seen it a million times. That's on there to show how like international law and the international community can learn from these local efforts. Because sometimes international law, as one of the lectures stressed, is kind of top down, but can it be bottom up, meaning grassroots? And the Colombian peace process, I think, is an interesting case where we can learn from these grassroots movements and then incorporate this into international law somehow. But I also want to reiterate the idea of genocide in Myanmar, Rwanda, and obviously, lamentably, other places. The discourse itself is what matters. So if you call Rwanda a genocide, that brings it to the level. I've been enjoying your debates on Myanmar. Some of you were like, we do need to intervene militarily because it has risen to the occasion, has risen to the level of genocide, what's happening in Myanmar, the lamentable situation, which has been going on for a long time as well. And as a side to that, I don't know if I mentioned it before, I did something for this foreign policy group in Phoenix where I moderated a debate, but just a discussion. And their argument was most people are prejudiced against the Rohingya people, meaning even the former Pulitzer Nobel Prize winner who went to prison and then became president and went to prison. Her name always slips my mind. So
can we go over just war and the preemptive war?
Yeah, the preemptive strikes, right, can be pernicious and bad in international law. Preemptive, I'm speaking at, because international law is determined by state behavior. Behavior is a huge thing in international law. So like when Israel hit Ozark, that's a nuclear bomb capacity center in Iraq. And then obviously the United States invaded Iraq to preempt nuclear strikes from Iraq that didn't even have nuclear power. The question becomes, for a lot of international lawyers, that's dangerous because then if one or two or three countries are using preemptive strikes, other countries are going to use them, right? So we can say it for anything. So like Vietnam can go in and attack Cambodia, or, the recent coup in Nigeria, where was the recent coup in Africa? Slipping my mind, but
Niger?
Yeah, Niger. I said Nigeria. In Niger, it's been a long day. Basically, someone could say, "Oh, well, that country isn't friendly with us, so we're going to strike it before it strikes us." That would be dangerous for international law. So people are they find it very pernicious, and that's the word to remember, that of preemptive strikes. Very bad. The idea of just war is different. Just war is the only way you're supposed to be able to have war, and that's if you're attacked. So it's like the exact opposite of preemptive attack. So in a lot of ways, it's really bad. So just war developed with the nation state, right? It also developed with the role of religion, Christianity, and all that stuff in international politics. But it gets to this paradoxical level, as I talk about in the lecture, where every side thinks he is right. So is just war just? That's something for you to discuss. What is just war? And someone asked me a question a while ago. They sent it about the Nicaraguan case where the United States said, well, we're, being attacked by Nicaragua, where it's like, obviously they're not. So you could just say, oh, they're attacking us, but are they really attacking us? So there's something also paradoxical with just war because both sides think they're right. People think they're being attacked. Like that's one of the reasons why Russia says it invaded the Ukraine, because it's being, surrounded by NATO. So we're being attacked.
Yeah, well, because on that debate that we did, I looked into it and they also said that then they tried to go back and say, oh, no, Ukraine is committing genocide here. And then it went to the ICJ, and they were like, we didn't find any evidence of that, or, you know.
Right. So that's where
Okay.
you get that paradoxical level. So it's basically all those correct. I mean, it developed with the nation state, obviously, with religion and politics, the idea of, you know, do we have a right to war sooner or later? And it also, you know, is paradoxical. Like you just said, that's a great point. You know, everyone's going to say, we're just, right? That's why they called, I think, the invasion of Panama just cause, right? The word just, to make it like within the bounds of retortion again, legality. So good.
Isn't it something like, though, that you can only use as much force as necessary?
Yeah.
Or same type of force?
That's another thing. There's a, well, I don't know how famous it is, but a case that is slipping my mind that's interesting, where their argument was, you know, you're using too much force, even if you are doing that. Gets into the case, if you've had me for other classes, I do a debate on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the idea of Vietnam. Henry Kissinger just died. Oh, I should put that on the exam. Henry Kissinger and the death of Henry Kissinger. You got to see how many points we got, though.
See, how old was it? 100.
That would be a good, because he used so much force. He basically said, if it flies, bomb it, right? If it flies, if it moves, kill everything. So, I mean, is that an excessive use of force? So that gets into international law.
I have a question, going back to the preemptive strikes and just war. Have preemptive strikes, or could they ever be justified? Because I know it's a bad thing, because like, I guess it's like, we'll never know if they really,
Right.
if the other state was ever really planning to do anything. But
Right.
like, I don't know, like, would that be like considered a declaration of war, like preemptive strikes? Or could it just be like a one and done type of thing? Like, I don't know if like anyone could ever like justify that.
Yeah, it's tough, because like you could go back, oh, we had to kill Hitler, right? But you never know. But the thing is, lawyers are very nervous about the idea of preemptive strike. That's what I think is, it's more a slippery slope they're used to. So it's it gets into a yeah, it definitely is a slippery slope. That's what they're nervous about. So they would rather have it not done at all. I'm not speaking for every international lawyer. I'm just saying the majority, and then having it done. Like, Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. You know, any state can make the claim for a preemptive strike. That's what makes war and all these conflicts very, very difficult, because every side thinks that they're just. Armenia and you know, Azerbaijan. Look at, I mean, the disaster right now in Armenia, right? Azerbaijan isn't sitting saying, oh, we did the wrong thing. No, they're saying this is our land. So it gets into that slippery slope, I think, problem.
Do you think that the International Court of Justice and the United Nations could serve as a better mediator?
I think it could, but it depends. It doesn't have the power. I'm a little older, so I remember when the United Nations were actually putting military presence on the ground through the blue helmets. You know, it wasn't the United Nations, but different groups, and the backlash against countries was incredible. So it's tough. You know, they say diplomacy without force is not diplomacy, that you need something behind diplomacy to back it up. I think the United Nations could be, we have to see later on whether states will, that was one of the questions, whether states should surrender to a certain degree their sovereignty. And that's what positivists say, no, we shouldn't surrender our sovereignty. So
well, I think the use of force needs to be evaluated. I don't think pulling shrapnel out of a child's skull was appropriate. I feel the same way about the other acts of genocide. I think there's a line, and you know, they need to reform these policies.
It's unfortunate the class is online, because I know a lot of you probably have a lot to say, more so. I mean, some of the debates were long and stuff like that. That's one of the things. That's why I want to give the opportunity for the Zoom. This is what becomes problematic, is that you know, the United Nations doesn't possibly do enough in the international community to stop real conflict. In fact, there was a good BBC article just recently. They've done it continually. All the conflicts that are going on that we don't even hear about because of the Ukraine, because of Gaza, etc. So like Myanmar has taken, a back seat, the Congo. There were a few others that were real. Eritrea and Ethiopia are now going to the table. I did something about that in my political violence course. There's so many conflicts going on. Burkina Faso, which I didn't know about, which I was reading about. So many conflicts out there that people don't know going on. Haiti is obviously an internal conflict. So yeah, I would agree. I think we're not, spending enough resources and energy to stop the world's conflict, which is bad for all of us because of supply chain and terrorism and, migration. People complain about immigration, but then look at all the conflict out there that drives it, and climate change, all that stuff. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I agree with your opinion regarding Russia's lack of case precedent. It's the same. We have the same core issue with a lot of these opinions don't get published, and the precedent doesn't get established appropriately through the International Court of Justice. And the use of military interference and coercion is just it may not be the best policy.
I think Russia can claim the preemptive strike as a precedent to justify what they do. And there's a saying in the legal field, right? When you open the door, anyone can enter there. So in the example of the Israel striking the nuclear plant and the Iraq invasion, I think it's not like a clear line between those things. And I think they can wiggle around because the international law is not a municipal law that you can know like exactly what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Well, I mean, if you even become a domestic lawyer, you can wiggle around. But you're right, there's much more room. That's why I always say, if you remember, the very beginning kind of reflected that. What is international law? I don't know. It's very ambiguous, right? I mean, we have all this stuff written. We have the United Nations. We've had the League of Nations, etc. But I think you're right. I think, people can take these things, and really there's a lot of room for interpretation. And I mean, obviously the world is bigger than, say, the United States or Norway or a state. So like people have different interpretations, different experiences, etc. So that definitely is true in a sense. I will leave it up to the group or whoever, on whether, Russia, the United States, Israel, Gaza, etc., who is right and who is wrong will definitely be an opinion for you people. Anything else? Did someone write? The Central American Court of Justice. Good question. Thank you, Mikhail. I know I did that a while ago, but I published it. So I'm, and I'm putting it in a book. So it's very important to me that the very first regional court gets a little attention. And the goal of the Central American Court was just to show that, in a regional context, states did surrender their sovereignty to a certain degree, at least at the beginning. And that even though these countries are very poor, you usually hear negative things about Central America, right? Oh, there's no democracy, all this stuff, that they did add to the international system. So it's like, it's trying to give you a more positive take on Central American countries. So that's what that's about, that it is valuable for international law, even though very few people, if anyone, talks about the Central American Court of Justice. Thanks for asking about that. Anything else? Paper questions? Life, liberty, happiness? That is in a nutshell. I'll take a few.
Okay, can I have one more question? Okay,
no, you can have as many as you want. I just wanted to say this quick thing is that, but those are the questions, and then I'll put like maybe another question that we had over the this conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, so if we were to put them in order, would it go positivism first?
Yeah, positivism, humanitarianism. That tension first.
And then natural law, or like what's
that tension would be first. It wouldn't be like positivism. Well, I'm talking about on the exam.
No, I'm talking about like in life, in real life.
Oh,
like
that's a tough thing. If you are a diehard human rights lawyer, you will put humanitarian law. Unfortunately, I would have to, this isn't my opinion, but it seems like state rights do trump humanitarian law.
Right.
If
That's
Turkey
what I'm
wants
saying.
to kick out refugees, Turkey kicks out refugees. I'm not picking on the Turkish, it could be any country. It's just they recently had some issues with that. The United States says this is our country, we will do what we want to immigrants. We've been taken to the International Court of Justice in that Nicaraguan case. Oh, that might go on there, the Nicaraguan versus the United States. And the United States basically said, you know, we're not going to listen to this result. It doesn't have jurisdiction, which, you know, so yeah, that's one of the interesting things. Good question. So I don't, that's a tough question, but again, oh, this should be on the test. Smaller countries do follow international law a little more because they have more at stake. And I think they don't feel like they can just go and send the resources to fight or to say no in the Ghana, Argentine case.
Yeah, they just cooperate more. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to just say how we were talking about like state rights trumping humanitarian rights. So how does that then, how do we ever justify that states are violating humanitarian law if they're just gonna keep to that positivist mindset that they have rights? You know, so like, how is it that we're ever going to win, and how is it that people are ever going to have a voice, especially those that are you know, in the midst of like a genocide? How could we ever or like the UN, I guess, ever justify or condemn a state basically for their human rights violations if the states just go on and claim positivism?
Right. You know, a lot of human rights lawyers, particularly those linked to Amnesty International, others will say there has to be a shaming. That's why Amnesty International
Sure,
does all this letter writing, that there's other ways. It doesn't have to be through war, that we can do this. If you start like apartheid, how there were all these movements, don't have relations with South Africa, etc. That there are ways other than just, you know, invading, say, Myanmar, that we can put pressure on states. Information is important, particularly in the information age. But you're right. I mean, the overall going in and doing something about it is very, very difficult because they have the state resources, etc. So, you know, that's the tension between humanitarian law and positivism. You know, on the one hand, you're right. Like, I want to stop what's going on in, say, Gaza or something like that. But at the same time, states will say, hey, this is our right, and that becomes problematic because even with Russia, and this is going to be interesting because Russia's saying we have nukes, we have nukes, we have nukes. From my opinion, one of the only reasons why we haven't like taken NATO against Russia in a real conflict is because we know Russia has nuclear weapons. Well, then other states want nuclear weapons, seeing that, you know, we are a little nervous to take on Russia. You know, this is one of the things too. It's like, if you're a powerful state with nuclear weapons, do you have more power in the international system? And also a lot of countries don't want to like stand up to Russia in that, just in the case, whether you like Russia or don't like what Russia's doing. But because it's expanded its trade with so many countries, they can't, because they depend on the oil from Russia and natural gas. So yeah, this becomes problematic. And it's the same thing with the United States. People aren't going to put sanctions on the United States.
So would you say that positivism and humanitarianism are basically just a battle over natural law? So, you know, like positivism says states have a say in natural law, and humanitarian is like, no, natural law should be protected regardless. And
yeah, regardless of state.
Gotcha. Okay.
That would be my argument. I mean, then you could talk to other people because people might have different interpretations. But the way I interpret natural law is that the human being, her and himself, have certain rights that supersede the state. So if the state comes, that Amnesty International is a big group. No one has the right to kill. So like every state that has the death penalty is just wrong because the death penalty, because you're taking away that person's rights. So their argument is, you know, that people have rights. But that's where you get into the thing, because one of my first letters, you weren't born then, but I wrote to save this Nigerian poet, and I wrote a letter to Amnesty, you know, to the Nigerian government. Like I was really young, and like a week later they beheaded him. So it was like I was, you know, it's one of those realistic things. You're a young kid, you like, you know, want to support humanitarian and natural law. So I wrote a letter to Nigeria. I think it was General Abacha at the time. And then boom, they killed the poet, the Nigerian poet. I mean, you know, that's pretty not traumatic for me, but like, you know, oh, wow. So this is how the world is. Like everyone was supporting this poet, but then off with
Wasn't it? Yeah, wasn't there something very similar that happened with Neruda and Chile?
Yeah. Well,
was-
he died of a heart attack.
Yeah, no, yeah, but like he was still like a very because I was just thinking like it's very interesting how like these poets have like so much voice in the matter as well.
Right. And then Chile killed, I forget who Chile killed, but that's not, I'm thinking of a cantante, a singer that Pinochet killed. And yeah, it really is, you're right, that becomes a question in international law, but we could talk about this. Oh, I wanted to double check if we reach 100 points. Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I didn't mean to deviate, but I did get questions in the thing. Yeah, the Joseph Cody case, Lord Resistant Army. I did something on that a long time ago. That would be an interesting paper about if you have 100 points, you take this exam. It opens, well, I can open it tonight if you want. You could basically, you don't have to do the final paper if you get, if you already have 100 points, you don't have to do it. And then that's you get the A+, because there are a good amount of extra points. I do that particularly on the online classes because a lot of you, you know, I mean, it's tough. Sometimes there's miscommunication, you know, and so you have a good amount of extra points. Anything else before we go?
So we just need to reach 100 in the numerator.
Right. The
Okay.
number in the, what do you mean numerator? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, in the in the Canvas grade
Yeah.
scale, it'll be like 100 points out of like 113 or 114, however many. Or like, let's say I have like an 82 or something out of like the whatever points. And so like 82 will be my grade in the class.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever your points are, I mean, if you have 82, you should definitely do the paper because
Yeah, that was just an example.
right. But whatever, yeah, whatever. Some people don't care. They're like, oh, I'm going to my father's business. I don't care. So I get an 82, that's fine. But yeah, whatever the points are. Some people get confused. They look at the Canvas percentage, but that's problematic. Canvas isn't the best for a few things, and that's one of them because sometimes they do the percentage by what you actually do. So it's like, what are you doing? So it's like how much you've done, but it doesn't take into account what you didn't do. So you don't get those points for what you didn't do. It's kind of weird. So yeah, I go by a point system. You have to fight for every point and stuff. But if you get 100, you are good. What else? Anything else? That's a good paper, The Lord Resistant. I haven't heard that name for a while. That whole Coney case was very famous. That's another kind of one of those, the problem with the international, as Katie put up, one of the problems with the international system or anything, like these things go in waves. Like there was a huge thing with the Coney case. It went on forever, right? It was like, oh, the Coney case, the Coney case, the Coney case. And then boom, you didn't hear much about it. So it would be interesting to resuscitate that case. No pun intended, because the Lord Resistance Party. And then I said resuscitate if you get the religion.
I got it.
Okay. But that would be he's a bit of a nut, you know, but you know, this is one of the things about a lot of these rural poor countries, you know, some of these people, you know, they fall into these quote unquote cults, like, you know, Waco, Texas and other things. It's very interesting. And then they become very violent and stuff like that. Is he even still alive, Joseph Kony?
I don't think he's alive, but I know he escaped everything. So he's either in hiding or he's dead. So.
Yeah. You get a lot of allies, you can hide anywhere. So any other questions? I want to run and deal with my kid, but if you want to Zoom sometime after, you know, during the break or something, just give me a call, well, through the email and we can talk. Are you all online students? Because I thought Tyler, you are. Oh, do you have a question, Tyler, or are you just saying yes?
I do have a question, and
Good.
I'm not an online student because I'll have you in the spring.
Oh, good.
Are you
Um,
taking 301, Tyler?
I
I'm
know
taking
I-
401. I took
I-
301 over the summer.
I
you
noticed,
did.
Sophia, you were in my class. That's in person. So yeah, that's
So
gonna.
this is gonna be the third class in a row. I said, you're not getting rid of me.
Yeah, I
That-
know.
I'm gonna have a fourth time in the spring, so I one up you.
I'm very excited. So what's up, Tyler?
I have two questions. One, are you able to open the exam earlier than 11 p.m. tonight?
Yeah, I can open it up. What time is it now? 7. I'll open it at 9.
Okay. And the second one, I think you went over this. But what is preemptive war?
Yeah, preemptive war is when, remember, you might not have all the evidence, but you haven't been attacked, but you think you're going to be attacked. So it's a preemptive strike. Like our argument for going into Iraq was initially not democracy, but Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. He's going to use them. But one, did he have mass destructions and weapons of mass destruction, and was he going to use them? That is questionable. So a preemptive strike, they're very nervous about, these lawyers, because a preemptive strike might be problematic because if it's a slippery slope. Ooh, maybe I'll write that, slippery slope, because a slippery slope means then other countries are going to use it for a broad range of reasons. Good question. All right, I'm going to take off now. If any of you, I'll be excited to see some of you next semester, because both those classes, 301 and the 401, I do in class. Unfortunately, I can't have all of you if you're online in class. But thanks for coming out, and I really thank you for waiting, everyone. And if you couldn't wait, I apologize to whoever's listening. I got stuck in the rain, traffic, getting kids and everything else, and I got here, and I'm like, I got to get in and blah, blah, blah. But you did wait a while, so I definitely appreciate it. Take care, everyone. If you have any questions, just write to me anytime.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Did
Of
he leave?
course.
Okay,
No.
sorry.
You can leave if you want to leave. Go ahead, Victoria. Right?
So yes. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So when I go into the grade book and I put in like the what if grades, let's say I get 100% on the midterm and obviously get 2 out of 2 on the discussion that's due tonight, and give myself a 0 for the final paper. It says that the assignment is 86.28, but then it gives me a 97.50 out of 113. Does that mean I would end with an A or B?
I'm sorry. How many points did you get?
97.50.
97.50?
Yeah.
That would be an A.
Okay.
It
Okay.
would
So
maybe be an A plus if you got 80%. If we did the what do you call it?
evaluation.
Evaluations are very low numbers this semester. We're like on 30%. I've never had that low. So do the evaluations.
I was going to send an email. I was going to
80%.
send an email for everybody to do it. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't care. Can you do that?
Okay.
I didn't know you could do
Yeah,
that.
Canvas can be supportive sometimes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Canvas. Someone made a discussion board once, and I'm like, you can do that? I didn't even know. So like, and then, you do get the point. So if you got 97, obviously, if you got those 2 points, the one you get for the subscription and then unsubscribe after the class. That's just my the subscription. Unfortunately, I'm not making money. The subscription is for my my insurance, because you always get great complaints. They say, look at this person didn't even know to subscribe to the channel to watch the videos. That's why he failed. So that's why I do that. But you do get 1 point. And then we get a point, a group point, if we get 80% on the thing. So yeah, so then you'd get with 97.5, you would get an A plus. Go ahead.
Okay.
Tyler.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure because I didn't not want to do the essay and then end with the B instead of an A.
Oh yeah. Well, if you have 97.5, you definitely want to do the essay. I mean, you send in garbage, you'll still get 3 points. You know what I mean? Go
Yeah.
ahead, Tyler.
I'm sure this is well explained, but for the paper, it's just like the other 2 classes. Just as long as it meets X, Y, and Z, it's good.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know me, like these classes go by so fast. It's like, it's not fair to expect a publishable paper.
Sounds good.
Sevilla.
Hi, so I just wanted to ask about the paper just one more time
Sure.
to make sure I have it down because I was looking through the syllabus and everything. So we just talk about the case itself. We use 3 sources, like it could be like literally like a credible website. It doesn't have to be like
Right.
an article. And then I just talk about the case and just give my opinion on it, and that's the article or that's the essay.
Yeah, I would like to see like what you think of the case, like in the sense that in a little deeper way for a 400 level course. So you don't want to just say, oh, this went in this direction. Did it go in the wrong direction? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this case? Did it, make an impact? And like we were talking about before, should there be other cases or are there political implications to this? Because a lot of you, well, a couple of you were saying, about the humanitarian law, right? If it's a state that goes, against, say, humanitarian law and for positivism, are you against that and why, etc.?
Gotcha, because I was thinking about doing the Bosnia and Herzegovina case versus Yugoslavia. I mean, it's labeled Serbia and Montenegro, but also Yugoslavia. So I wanted to talk about like the Geneva Convention and just talk about that. And so if I incorporate like course concepts into it and just talk about like, oh, it did go into the right direction, or oh, it did not,
Right.
like that will be like sustenance enough for the
Right. Definitely that's meaty enough. Definitely.
Gotcha.
Definitely,
And
of course.
and
Sorry.
yeah, and then when do you know if you'll get back with like the grades of the virtual rebuttals?
Oh yeah, I already did all the virtual ones, and then I'll have to get the virtual. But the thing is, the problem is because I'm a little more lenient with the time on that.
Mhm.
Like, oh, if you get it in, after until this date, it's fine. So then they all wait to the last minute. I was a student too, so I get a bunch of them, so it takes a little time. But don't worry, I'll get to them.
Okay, gotcha. Because I was waiting to see all the debates first, but I ended up just doing against my topic. So I didn't know if that was gonna impact my grade because I
No,
couldn't.
yeah. Hey, you
Okay.
can do it on anything. That's like open. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Question
Thank
after
you.
that.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so I did an Excel spreadsheet for the grades. And so what I'm showing is we have a total of 114 points. And that's not including the if we get to 80%, and then also the what do you call it?
Right. So that'd be
subscription.
116. That's too many.
So yeah, I have 114 on there. So, but okay, so since I was in session A with you, are you still able to see or that I'm subscribed, or is that?
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure with that. And then last session A, I did 2 of the surveys or whatever it is for SPGS,
Yeah.
whatever.
No, you still got to do this one. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Talk to Trudy about that.
Because it said
I could comment on
it says
that.
like, oh, required 2.
Right. Tyler knows more than me because they just they
so-
have the permission. That's the thing.
Tyler,
They
tell
have the
me.
university permission.
Okay.
Okay.
I can't say anything.
Is it okay if I just quickly weigh in on
Yeah,
this?
go.
So I have another session B also and a session C that requires it. So,
Right.
but I only need two of them, not like 5 or 6. So as long as you meet the session C requirement, if you have any, then you're good. So like
Oh, really?
Like I would need 5, but I only need 2 because the session C like overrides the A and the B. So
Okay,
I
so-
only need
Yeah,
2.
you did a session C, so but that's more. You need more for the session C than the A and B, right?
You need 2 instead of 1, but that 2 overrides the smaller ones. So all I need to do is 2.
Okay, so Tyler, this is how mine is. So I did a session A with Dr. Ripley, and then I'm doing the session B. But when I was on there, it said it's required 2.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you
We're only
have.
required
that-
1, really. So,
yeah.
and I did 2 of them.
I have the
So-
same
so then
problem.
sorry.
I was just saying, I know exactly what she's talking about because I actually didn't have any SP SG or requirements or anything. But then when I went into to take like the surveys, it said I had 2 requirements for this course specifically, but I only did 1.
Yeah, I think it's 1 for a or B class.
Yeah, and I did 2 because I have session A and session B. But I did
Okay.
both of them last last session.
Yeah, I did the same thing, but I
Okay.
think it's a little different because I have the
Yeah.
session C, but if it,
C,
you
right.
just, as long as you just do what it says, like the number, then you'll be fine.
Yeah, 'cause
I-
it says you are required now, so. I'm
Yeah,
good, I think.
it's funny. I'm not on the student side, obviously. So like they don't have enough resources and people, I think. So it does get difficult for you students because sometimes they'll say, oh, go do it. And then you do it and the website isn't up or the thing's not ready and things like that. But I want to be clear, they have the right from the university. So like they override me. Like it's like I'm kind of obliged to say yes. So they use all my classes and they like my classes because they have a lot of students. Hey, I'm very excited then so if you're in my class again. And yeah, definitely reach out and talk. I gotta get going now because I brought the kids home and now they have to eat and stuff. But take care, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out and waiting.
All right, thank you.
Thank